Hello, everyone. We are back. Another episode in the Design Lounge. This is the Shelter series. And we're so excited to not only have someone that's going to provide great insight, but also great awards winner alum, Jeffrey Ramirez. How are you doing?
Doing great. How are you? Thanks for having
Uh,
me.
Absolutely, absolutely. For those that don't know who you are or what you guys do, kind of give us a brief insight into what you guys offer.
Sure. I am a partner and brand designer at the Up Studio. We're an architecture, interior, and brand design studio based in New York, but we work nationally on custom modern homes.
Love it, love it. And we're gonna get to some of those homes as well as Netflix homes, award-winning homes. We're gonna touch on all of that. But I gotta start first. Brand design, graphic design. I'm going through the research. I'm looking at the photos, and I see the team photos, right? And everyone else has on black except for you and tan. And then I go down to the rest of the photos of the actual individual team members, and they have on, black, traditional, white, and then you have on a blue jacket. So first, I want to know, was that intentional?
Yeah. You know,
Okay.
I think there's a stereotype of architects that they're in black most of the time, and it does tend to be true in our room.
Yeah.
Um, we knew in some of those portraits that we wanted to kind of keep a consistent aesthetic between the whole team, but no, there was no specific rules at any of those shoots.
I just figured maybe okay, he's the brand designer, so he's gonna peacock a little bit. He needs to be a little bit different. Let people know that he's on the brand side as opposed to the architect side. So I figured maybe I didn't know. I wanted to ask.
Look, I'm sure my team would say there's truth to that, but
Okay,
that might
okay.
just
So
be a running all the time theme and not just a specific portrait day.
okay, so subconsciously, you're like, hey, they're gonna wear all black. Let me just stand out a little bit, make sure we define the brand portion. But as we talk about that again, brand designer, right? Graphic design specifically, brand design. I know you worked at other studios before launching the Up Studio in 2011. Did you always know that you wanted to utilize those services in this industry? Because obviously, with brand design, you can go anywhere, right? So why interiors? Why homes?
Well, it's interesting. So, as a brand designer, I think part of the job inherently is kind of getting in the weeds and understanding the brand that you're designing for,
Hmm.
and making sure that you're communicating those ideas effectively. I did always want to be an architect as a
Okay.
kid, but I started playing music and I went in some other different directions and landed on graphic design. Um, and about 15 years ago now, I met who the two guys who became my business partners. Um, and it was a very simple initial conversation. They were about to get their licenses and they were just looking for some logo design.
Okay.
Um, the way my partner John likes to remind me that the conversation went was he had been telling me about some of the really smart ideas that he was pitching for some clients to try to get them on board to let be the guinea pig basically to do the first modern home.
Exactly.
Um, and everything he was saying sounded brilliant, and the way he was presenting it made no sense. And I don't know why I had the confidence at the time to tell this total stranger that what he was talking about visually made no sense at all. Um,
Okay.
but I just kind of the first couple of years of our studio was really that it was how do we tell the story of architecture, and so brand design kind of led right into that, and it's been kind of the through line for the last 15 years for us.
Yeah, to go from someone needing graphic design to end up becoming a founder of a design practice. I mean that seems like that is a stretch. So you definitely obviously you must have had the chutzpah to say that, but also the sales skills within that. You actually say graphic design has the ability to kind of like shape cities. I want you to expand about that because again, a lot of
Sure.
people, again, a lot of the people that watch this are within the industry and they think of design and they hold design, the architectural side of it or the interior side of it in such high regard. And maybe the brand design, and as you explained earlier, the communication of the design is overlooked. So talk about its impact and actually what you meant by that when you say it can reshape cities.
Yeah, I really honestly do believe that. I think in the big picture of it, one of the lines I like to use a lot is, there's this simple yellow line that's dividing streets around the world, and
Hmm.
that is a small piece of graphic design that is shaping cities and saving lives and keeping us all from crashing into each other every day. And there is this really simple graphic language that is visual. It is communicated to everybody without need for typography or language itself, that literally affects the built environment. So I think about it like that, but to bring it a little bit more into the AEC industry, I think in general, especially in home design, I really think about it in three parts. I think there's a way that brand and graphic design can shape the way that we talk to potential clients up front. I think it
Hmm.
can shape the way we talk to current clients while we're in the middle of the design process. And I think it can shape the way that we document homes when they're done. But I do feel like there's a little bit of trap in the industry that there's this idea that documenting the home at the end is the way that we're communicating with potential clients.
Totally.
Um, and I think there's a little bit of a missed gap in making sure that we're making architecture a little bit more approachable and accessible, and not just taking pretty pictures of some homes that we've executed.
No, and actually, it's interesting you say that because I had these conversations with various individuals throughout design. And what I'm starting to realize, a common through thread of some of the more successful, whether it's interior designers, furniture designers, etc., is they actually bringing them into the process, right? Obviously, they show the pretty pictures at the end. They show the amazing design home, and they show the lighting design, etc. But some of the people there are like, no, actually, what not only kind of educated the consumer of the quality, the intention behind it, the reason for the design, but also it also validated their services, right? Because they were actually to be like, okay, instead of you just showing you, okay, this is what it ends like. No, this is everything involved within this process. So the consumer not only is educated on the process, but also they understand the process a little bit better. Not that they're going to start doing that, but then they appreciate the value behind it. So then it also eliminates, that pricing issue. Like, why am I paying for this? Well, there's X amount of hours involved. It requires this many people. So I continue to hear that over and over again.
Yeah, I think in general, we're designing custom homes for individuals or families, and it's very, very likely that the homes that we complete, you will never have the opportunity to step inside. Um, and I think the big difference in documenting a portfolio for real estate versus architecture and interiors is that it's not a product, right? Like our
Mm-hmm.
portfolio should be a way to not show you what it might be to live, not show you what it might be like to live in this house, but to show you what we did for this specific family or this specific person that made living in that house a joy every day, right? So
Totally.
it's making sure that we're documenting in a way that's talking about the services, like you're saying, rather than thinking about it like a product. And I'm sure this is a theme that we'll come back to a lot, but we think a lot in the studio about how we make that more approachable. That starting that journey in the home design process is really scary for a lot of people. It's often
Without question.
the most money they've ever spent. It's
Well,
often a very long relationship, and it's scary.
even the idea of getting a home, right? People always real estate side, they always say this is the biggest system that one will make, right? Well, when you talk about custom homes, and I'm gonna jump into it later on, but I took that quiz, and it was like, I never even thought about this. Like, do I want this versus this? Do I want that? Do I want that? So it is even more scary. But I want to go back to the actual brand design aspect and
Sure.
flip it. Typically, again, you have maybe a company that is founded by architects, and then they'll add brand designer. They'll outsource brand designer, marketing, and graphics, or whatever, right? Or they might bring someone internally after they've already been established. You have the opportunity to be there from the ground up. How do you think your understanding and the communication of that has changed the Upstudio's ability to design not only their design process, but just how they show up when it comes to working with clientele or even engaging with clientele?
It's a great question. I think in this idea of bringing brand design into the design process of architecture, we've been able to communicate bigger ideas to clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it has, in subtle ways, led to better projects being built, right? So if our first presentations, which they are incredibly simple, flat, two-dimensional diagrams, but we're able to look at the site and study the path of the sun and the accents points and the utility and the code and all that kind of stuff in really simple diagrams, and then talk to a family about why we think it's important to place the areas of the home that they'll be gathering the most in this location with maybe the best views or the best natural light versus where we're going to place the garage, right? And it's these big concepts that happen from day one, um, that allow us to kind of slowly mold the home over a period of phases
Hmm.
without having to like go back in the middle of DD and someone be like, well, actually, I think the bedroom should be on the other side of the house.
Right.
It's this idea of like using brand design and graphic design to communicate the why behind the design, so that everyone is like locked in and it's not just stuck in these brilliant architects' heads of why you put that
Right.
there.
Yeah, the beautiful mind that no one else can, no
Yeah,
one, no one
exactly.
else can penetrate or understand. I would imagine it changes the conversation. Obviously, you guys are super successful. Again, we talked about the Gray Awards, we talked about other awards, we talked about Netflix shows. 2024, man, heading into 2025, we'll be at the third or fourth quarter by the time this airs. What is the importance now? Because again, you started in 2011. Now we know the importance of social media, digital marketing, brand design, right? It's at the forefront, right? But for people that haven't been doing it for the last 15 years, and congratulations on that, you guys heading on 15 years. What is it to someone maybe they're starting out, right? They're wanting to start their firm, they're wanting to start their practice. What is the important to make to add that level of success, or maybe add to make sure that you had that characteristics within your company to help predict success?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit of broken record on this, but that Simon Sinek book, Start With Why, really changed
Um,
the way I
I've
kind
read
of
that.
think about everything. Um,
Yeah.
and I think if you can use, uh, you know, brand, graphic design, communication, language, storytelling, all of this to make sure that you are really articulating the reasons behind architecture and interiors, I ultimately think it breeds better design across the board. I really think it uh, helps bring in new clients. I think it helps
Hmm.
explain to clients who are already signed up the ideas that are in your head, and I think it helps document the projects afterwards in a really powerful way. But it's really just that like constantly be asking yourself, why? Like what are we showing here? Why is this wall in this direction? What views are we facing? What like what's the sun doing and why? And if you can keep reiterating that why throughout the project, I think it really does lead to a better world, like a better built world.
Totally, totally built environment. So, okay, let's talk about you guys becoming a resource, right? You guys have had implemented programs and resources. We talked about it briefly, right? Again, the idea of building a custom home, I've never done it, but I could only imagine. Again, I purchase a home, and then you're like, okay, I moved on from that. I want a custom home. What is that process like? And what was that process? What is that process traditionally like? And then why did you come up with the cost calculator to help ease that, or maybe to make it a more transparent process?
Yeah, I mean it's exactly that, right? It's um the the great thing about being a little bit of an outsider to this industry in general
Mhm.
is I'm able to when it doesn't turn into imposter syndrome, I'm able to step back and hear some of the questions that I'm hearing over and over again from our clients.
Yeah,
And it's the first thing that any potential client asks, right? Like this thing that I'm thinking, what is it actually going to cost? And they
yeah.
never mean what is it going to cost in architecture fees. They never mean what's the cost of construction. They mean
In
all
totality,
all in. If I build
yeah.
a custom home that I'm dreaming of, what is this actually going to cost? So we just thought we could gamify that process a little bit, right? We tried to make this really fun and engaging web app that simplifies that down to 7 questions, and we can give people a realistic number on what we think that project would actually take to build. And I think for the rest of the industry, to have clients coming to you with a realistic expectation of what those numbers are makes that initial process so much more seamless up front, and it's really valuable.
And I want to touch on that again because again, I keep having this conversation. The customer qualifies themselves, right? When you provide this data, and what I was going through myself, it was starting one of the questions. I want to know how many people actually answer this. Where it's talking about the finishes, right? And it's like you want cost-effective finishes. I don't know how many people are willing to be like, "Oh yeah, that is me. I want
Yep.
cost-effective instead of modern or luxe," right? But again, the beauty behind that is, as you're picking and manipulating the questions, it gives you a ticker. How much I'm spending? How big is the house? And then it goes into square footage, and then it goes into land. It tells me, am I spending 2 million or do I want to spend 5 million? How much how much of that qualifies the customer before, and then when they're ready to go, they're like, okay, I know if I want these finishes, if I want this type of home, it's going to cost me X amount of dollars.
Yeah, completely. I mean, it's a giant business development tool for us. Honestly, it to put it bluntly, weeds out a lot of people, and it weeds out a
Hmm.
lot of early conversations that are really time consuming to jump on the phone with a client, get really excited about what they're talking about, and then realize that they just frankly don't have the budget to pull it off right now.
Totally.
So there is inherently in that tool, I think it's really fun and engaging for the potential homeowner, but I also think it, sets a realistic tone for what a custom home is actually going to cost to build. Um, and like you said, there are variables that you can continue to work, right? So if you know that you really want to have really beautiful high-end finishes throughout the house, and the last question was what's the square footage that you need, you're able to kind of go back and forth and say like, maybe I'm willing to lose 200 square feet to make sure that I get better finishes in a smaller project. Um, and then come to an architect or an interior designer with that in mind. And that allows them to actually work in like a realistic thing. And it eliminates some of that friction of those initial biz dev calls.
No, no, no. I would imagine, like I said, I literally just had this conversation separately, and it was like prioritizing like, what's important, right? Oh, I want this versus this, and some of the questions are super entertaining. What was the process of coming up with that? Was something that I would imagine is that something that you spearheaded, or was clients constantly asking, or those biz dev questions? You're like, you know what? I have an app for that, or I have an idea for that that turned into the app. What was that process?
Yeah, it's really that. It's being kind of a fly on the wall a lot and hearing these questions that are coming up over and over again. And um, my head just thinks about these things a little bit differently, and I start seeing like, how do we gamify that? How do we make that approachable? How do we lower that barrier to entry and make this something that people would enjoy actually using? Yeah, and then we're on our third version of the cost
Okay.
calculator. It's a really really valuable tool for us. It drives tens of thousands of views on our website a year, so we know that there's interest in it, and we keep trying to make it better and better and a little bit more, user friendly. And we want people to be able to play it, uh, find the numbers, and download that PDF, whether they're ready to talk to us or not, or if they're going to go work with another architect. That is totally fine with us. We think good
Yeah.
design leads to more good design. So if we can make it a tool for the industry, even if it doesn't mean people are coming to us, I think that's uh, the kind of the things we're always after.
No, and it makes it aspirational too, right? Because you're allowing someone to communicate or find out about you guys sooner, right? Just the fact is, okay, you know what? I want to aspire to have a custom home in X amount of years. What does something like that even look like, right? They can start prioritizing. Okay, what is their wish list? What is their must haves or non negotiables versus things that okay, I can skip on that. Like you said earlier, I want to have luxury finishes in order for me to afford that, maybe I'm going to have 500 square feet less of a property, but I'm going to have those pristine finishes.
Right. I think it in general, when you're talking about marketing for uh, custom home design, it's very rare that you're gonna like show up number one in front of somebody's face on the day that they say, I'm ready to build a house, right? So you have to do this
Totally.
work to be answering their questions, whether it's a year before they're actually ready to pull the trigger on something. And then there's the game of staying top of mind for a year, so that when they're actually ready to call, they're like, remember that firm that already helped me answer a bunch of these questions? They've already given me transparency. I've seen their face, I've seen their work, and actually remember our name at that point and pick up the phone.
I love that. And I want to ask a question whether or not you've determined this. So I'm sure you have, or you thought about it at least for me, like you said, tens of those people downloaded this every year, it's working. The people that complete it, right? Do you have an idea of what the closing ratio is? Because again, I'm trying to think about this from our audience, from our
Oh yeah.
sales perspective, right? Having this tool, whether they use you guys or not, but their own version of it, how does that increase the likelihood, A, of a sale? But I would imagine also, too, the process of the design and eliminates a lot of headaches. People, again, are they're almost qualifying themselves before they even meet with you guys.
Yeah, I mean the if you look at the actual like close rate from a web
Hmm.
app to actually the 10 or 15 projects that we take on a year, it's incredibly low, right? I think there's 60,000 people using the cost calculator a year on our website, and we're probably getting, two or three actual signups a year that stumbled upon us that way.
Okay.
But those two or three projects are a quarter of our year for our team
Exactly.
of 13 people, right? So
Yeah.
that has a very real effect. And I think, again, um, we sometimes use that tool in the reverse also, right? We sometimes have a client that comes to us and we send that to them before we jump on the phone so that we can, by the time we are face to face with them, we're able to have this realistic conversation of like, okay, you've seen roughly the numbers that this home that you're dreaming of is going to cost. And if we're all in the same ballpark, that day one conversation is a lot smoother, a lot more fun, a lot more realistically we can get into actually what we can design for you. And it's avoiding those like 5 meetings that lead to we can't take this project.
No, totally, 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 totally a time saver. It seems like you guys are all about, obviously, like you said, incorporating the design, improving design, but also the transparency within the design industry, right? And making it easier for the consumer. Shift into personal space. Was the motivation behind that? Because again, I took that. I think there's 50 initial questions, and you do make it super easy. It's like yes or no, or I need more information. What is this, right? And then you go to the 150 questions, which that was the part. The first 50 didn't stop me as much. It was 150, which I believe you guys have the amenity list.
Yep.
It's like, oh, do I need this versus that? What does that even mean? Is that a version of that? And then also I noticed like, okay, well, yeah, I'm saying I want bold colors, but then I'm saying I want neutral colors. Like, oh, what do I want? So talk about that process, and
Sure.
not only how you're making it transparent for the industry, but also how you're allowing the consumer to understand the psychology behind the design.
Sure. Yeah, so personal space, I know you know, but for your audience, it's a personality test that basically pairs your unique personality with a wish list of amenities that you would want in your dream home. And you said it exactly right, right? You can answer really quickly 50 fun slide illustrations about your personality and your identity. But what we do is we then pair that unique identity with amenities that we think would make sense to you. They might not be things you've ever thought of before. They might be things that you need to do a quick read up on. But we throw those ideas out in a way that is, uniquely tailored to who you are. We say it a lot in the studio, and I think this might have been the catalyst for why we decided to design this game. Um, but the better that we really get to know a homeowner, the better that we can design a home that really suits their lives.
Yeah,
So how does an architect or an interior designer really get to know a family or an individual that they're designing for really quickly on day one? Because there's an expectation of once you're signed up, like we're here, we're in the design process, we're ready to
right.
go. How from day one are we understanding, um, you know, is this person more of a recluse than a host, right? Do we want to
Totally.
design them a formal dining room,
Well,
or is
and you
budget
and you
better
start
spent? Right.
it makes me think of those things. Like it made me think about it, and also made me think about it. Okay, if I'm doing this with a partner, right? Like, oh, how much different are these? You know what I mean? I know. I think you have the aspect you can share it with someone,
Yep.
but it's like how much different are these requirements or these amenities that I like versus what they want?
Yeah.
And
So,
I started thinking about that. Like, oh, they would probably want this. I don't care about it as much, but they would probably want
right.
this. And so it's interesting to even again. And I did this in 20 minutes. But I started having that psychologically from a design perspective. I started thinking, asking those questions.
Right, and that's what we really want to encourage is um, allowing the homeowner who's controlling the budget and the scope of the project to ask themselves some of those questions up front that otherwise they probably wouldn't have. I say it over and over again that architects have all of this insanely like powerful knowledge in their mind, but
Mhm.
if a client comes to you on day one and they don't say anything about sustainable design, it's pretty hard to halfway through DD start pitching them all of these building systems that are going to make their home more sustainable, but is going to increase their budget, in the short term. But if you can
Totally.
have those conversations up front and you can talk to them in a language that makes sense to them, it's a lot easier to get, better design built. So one of the examples I use a lot in personal space, right, is if we learn that a client is an investor or they see themselves as an investor, but they don't relate to being an environmentalist, then the conversation for solar and geothermal and all these environmental systems can be framed in a narrative that is more towards here are the long-term investments that you're going to get from these products, rather than appealing to their sustainable nature, which may lead the conversation to being, well, we don't want those. So if we really
Yeah.
believe that our homes can be more sustainable and we learn how to communicate with our clients even better, we can move that ship in the right direction.
Totally. I mean, essentially, you guys have hacked a way to gamify the design process to make it easy on the consumer, right? To make it fun, make it quick, make it thought provoking. But also, that allows you not only, again, qualify the consumer qualifies themselves, you qualify the consumer, which also allows you to streamline the design process and then ultimately make a better design process.
Yeah, and it's been great for us so far. So we launched the web app version of this a couple months ago, which is what you're
Okay.
talking about. And like you said, you play that as an individual and you share that with your partner, and you can see where you align and where you don't. And then you walk away with a PDF of literally your must haves and nice to haves. You can print it out and they can bring it to any architect, any designer to get started on a project. We also just redesigned it slightly so we can play it
Okay.
as a card game also. And so
Okay.
we're gonna have our first retail product available hopefully before the holidays this year. And that's a card game that uh, a designer can play on day one, and they can sit in front of a couple that they've met maybe an hour earlier and see them say, both of us relate to being a gardener, but none of us relate to being a parent, right? And
Yeah.
what does that mean for an architect and an interior designer to say, like, okay, well, here are maybe the priorities in this home, and let's design a home that's really, truly unique to them.
Love that. Love that. Love that. Before we go, I have to again. I want to talk about comfortable homes. And then, did you ever expect to have a home that was going to turn into a Netflix movie? Like, what was that process like? I mean, I know you're talking about gamifying design, but
Yeah.
again, obviously, at the end of the day, it's still a design. Leave the world behind. I haven't watched it. Now I'm going to go back and want to watch it. How does that even come about?
Look, there's absolutely no chance that we could have even made that a bucket list item for our studio.
Right?
That was a very wonderful serendipitous call that we got. I picked up the phone. We are working remote in 2020. I picked up a random number, um, which frankly I don't usually do.
Don't usually do, right?
Full cold call, and it's a producer from Netflix who had seen our home in some press, and were curious if they could rent it. Again, this was designed for a specific family,
Hmm.
so it's very much a privately owned, lived-in house.
Hmm.
And when they started talking about the project that they were thinking about doing it, which as it went through the months started becoming, oh, this is Julia Roberts, this is Mahershala Ali,
Oh,
this is
oh,
Sam Esmail, this is produced by the Obamas. It started going
right.
up and up.
And so like,
Um,
oh, this
yeah,
is little Netflix film, right? With just little A-list actors attached
yeah.
to it.
So it very quickly became a call that was like, well, this is probably not something that we would pass along to, oh, we will very much call the client right now
Right.
and see if they're interested. And it was a really fun process. That home ended up being completely redesigned on a soundstage as well. So we were able to work with the Netflix team to basically build a clone prototype of the house on a soundstage where they could get some of the shots that they needed. And yeah, they were in the house for 2 or 3 months. Ultimately made a really special movie. I think I'd love to follow up with you after you see the movie because it's a fun it's a good like book club movie. You definitely
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
call people after and talk about it.
It's funny you say that because I heard about it when the movie came out, and I think it was one of the things where I was just doing stuff and just, I didn't know. But now after seeing that, I'm gonna definitely come back to it. And then Concealed Cottage, you won the Great Award. Had to shout that out. Looking at that, home where it's like almost like invisible, right? Where
Yeah.
it reflects the environment behind it. Talk about that really quick.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's a perfect example of getting to know a client, right?
Hmm.
They very much wanted a home that would disappear. This was a guest house, and they needed some space for some of their incredibly artistic friends. but they didn't want it to become something that was an eyesore on their property, and they loved the natural landscape that was wildly growing. So creating it in a way where it was fully private on one side and we could wrap it in reflective surface really starts to make this thing disappear.
Yeah, totally, totally. Well, you guys won the Visionary Award. You guys are doing visionary things again within the industry. You talked about the card game coming out. Let us know. So, what is next? How is Up Studio? What other things are you going to be doing coming forward? Gamifying the interior design, the design aspect, making it transparent to the industry. What else is next? What else can we expect?
Yeah, I mean, we have some of our favorite projects to date in the ground right now. So we're really excited to see some of those come together. And we've got plenty of other ideas for some, architecture and interior resources that hopefully make this scary home design process a little bit more accessible.
Love it, love it, love to hear it. Love the work you guys are doing. Jeffrey, thanks again for taking the time.
Of
And
course.
I'll be looking forward to watching the movie and also checking out the card game when it comes out.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Brendan.
All right, bye bye.
Bye.